Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So this video is going to be my labor and delivery story. I'm gonna try to make it short. I don't want it to be long. I literally just filmed it and it was almost 30 minutes and I was like, ain't nobody gonna watch this. So I'm trying to redo it and hopefully it won't be so long. So Iris is currently 16 days old, so she's just over 2 weeks. And basically how it all went down was at my 37-week appointment, I was told that I had low fluid levels and that she was measuring pretty small, and my doctor did tell me that if my fluid levels were any lower at my next week's appointment that I was going to have to be induced. So that kind of told me that he was a little bit concerned that my fluid levels were going down and that there was more than likely a chance that I was going to have to be induced the next week. He had always been very, very honest with me, and I don't think he would have told me that if there wasn't more of a possibility that we were gonna have to induce than there wasn't, if that makes sense. So I attempted to take matters into my own hands, and even though a lot of people will not agree with this, that's perfectly fine. It was my choice, it was my decision, and I don't regret it, but I attempted to induce my own labor that night and did the midwife's brew. It did not work for me because I guess my body was not ready, and that's perfectly fine. I definitely believe that those kind of induction methods will only put you into labor if your body is ready for it, and apparently my body was not. So that happened on a Tuesday, on the 30th, I believe, of July, and I had a couple contractions for about 4 hours, and then after that, nothing. I didn't have any diarrhea. I threw up maybe like a little bit, and other than that, nothing. The next day I was perfectly fine, and then come Thursday, August 1st, I was at work, and around lunchtime I felt like a little gush of fluid, and I was like, oh, what's that? So I went to the bathroom, I checked. There was a little bit of liquid on my panties, but with the gush that I felt like there should have been more, but there wasn't. So I was like, oh, maybe it's nothing, maybe I just peed myself, I'm not too sure, whatever. So I ended up going on my break. I went to Target, I went grocery shopping. And the whole entire time I was there, I kind of just kept feeling like a slow leak, but every time I would check my underwear, they weren't that wet. So I was like, maybe it's just in my head, I'm not too sure. 2 hours go by and I kept feeling the same thing, so I ended up texting Michael and telling him that I think my water was leaking, that I was gonna leave early so we could go to triage. So I ended up telling my boss, hey, I think my water's leaking, I'm gonna go to triage. She's like, yeah, that's fine, go ahead. So I had to grab all my groceries. It was pouring at this point, like pouring rain. So I had to grab my groceries from like the fridge at work, put it in my car, get home, unload everything, and then we kind of just decided to prep everything in case this was it. So I had already had the baby's backpack, my bag packed, like I had everything ready, but we just had to like unload the groceries, make sure we take the dog out, feed the animals, kind of just leave everything ready in case we weren't coming home. So I ended up putting all of our bags, the car seat and everything in the car, and we ended up getting to triage around 7 o'clock. And I basically told them what was going on, and they did 3 tests at first. They did 3 strip tests, which kind of just measures the pH levels. If it's your amniotic fluid, it'll turn blue. If it's not, it'll stay yellow. All 3 of those came back negative. So they determined that my water hadn't broken, but when the triage doctor checked me to see if I had any type of dilation or effacement, the second he stuck his fingers up there was a giant gush, and it even wet the bed, and he was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's amniotic fluid, let's go ahead and do a different test. So they did an I don't know, they did something. It's like a swab test where they swab my cervix to check, and they sent it to the lab, and they told us that it'll be back in about an hour if it was positive that we were going to be admitted and that we'd be having a baby soon. We were so ready for it to come back negative. We were just like, oh, it's probably nothing, whatever. So we were there and we were waiting, And I ended up going to the bathroom, and as I'm walking out of the bathroom back to the room, the doctor stops me and he's like, well, the test came back positive, your amniotic fluid is leaking, so we're going to go ahead and admit you, and you can start calling your family and letting them know that you'll probably be having a baby sometime tomorrow. And I was like, oh shit. So I got back in the room and I told Michael, I'm like, we need to start calling everyone, we're getting admitted, the test came back positive. And he was like, are you serious? And I'm like, yeah. So we called my family, we called his family, and it's actually really funny because his parents were literally here just that past weekend, like the weekend right before we gave birth. They were up here in Orlando, and my family as well, they were up here the week before. They were in Disney. So it's just funny how all of that happens. But we ended up calling them and letting them know, hey, we're getting admitted, my water broke, probably gonna have a baby by tomorrow, so if you guys want to start heading up tomorrow morning, you can. And by this point I had already started having some contractions, but if you've watched any of my other bump dates, you would know that I've been having contractions for the longest time throughout my pregnancy. So these were kind of just those same kind of Braxton Hicks, just super consistent contractions. And once we got upstairs, they basically told me that they were going to give me a medicine to help soften my cervix a little bit more, ripen it, called Cervidil, but they didn't want to do it until my contractions slowed down. So they gave me Visceral, that did nothing. They gave me fluids, again, that did nothing. And they kind of just had to wait it out until about 2 a.m. when they died down, and I got the Cervidil. At that point I had only progressed about half a centimeter, so I was maybe like 1.5 centimeters dilated. So they put in the Cervidil, and around 8 a.m. the next day my doctor came in and he checked me, and at that point I was at a 4. So between 2 and 8 I dilated from 1 to 4, and to be honest I didn't even feel it. I was having a little bit of cramping, but it was like literally nothing. Like I managed to basically almost sleep the whole night, other than them coming in to take my blood pressure and, you know, kind of monitor me and monitor the baby. Other than that, I really had no pain. So I managed to get to a 4, and then they decided to start me on Pitocin. Because of the fact that I was leaking, they didn't know how long my water had been leaking, and obviously there's always a risk of infection with that kind of stuff. So when he came in to start the Pitocin, he broke the rest of my water. And instead of doing the Pitocin through the IV drip, they actually inserted it vaginally directly into the uterus, and then they did the same thing with like I guess like a pump kind of thing, just in case, because she had low fluid levels in there. In case she needed any more, they could just pump it through there and she could automatically have more fluid. So they stuck both of those up there. They didn't really feel like anything. It was a little bit painful putting it in, but once they were in, I didn't feel anything. And they started me on the Pitocin. I didn't want the epidural, so they didn't give it to me. And I managed to labor naturally from 8 a.m. to about 1 o'clock. And I got up to a level, I want to say 11 on the Pitocin drip, and they were coming every minute. So they were pretty strong. Again, I managed to get from a 1 to a 4, and I barely felt anything. But once I got the Pitocin, they became so much more painful. I was breathing through them. I felt like I was doing really good, but my body was just giving out on me. I was throwing up. I felt super weak, and even though I didn't want to, I ended up getting the walking epidural, because I told Michael, I'm like, I don't even know how far along I am right now, and if I'm not even close to, like, if I wasn't at least 7 centimeters, I wasn't gonna make it. I was like, I'm not gonna be able to get to 10 centimeters and eventually start pushing if I continue like this. So we ended up getting the walking epidural. I still felt the contractions, like they still hurt, but they were just significantly less. And then that was around 1:30, and the doctor came in to check me again once I got the epidural, and I had only progressed to a 5. So between 8 And one, I had only progressed 1 centimeter laboring all of those hours. I was bouncing on the ball, I was walking around, like all of that just to labor 1 centimeter. I was like, are you kidding me? I think it was just because my body was not relaxed. It wasn't, I don't know, like it was weird. I labored for so long and only got to 1 centimeter. And then once I got the epidural and I started to relax, I managed to get from a 5 to an 8 in a matter of 2 hours, which was crazy to me because I was like, how is this even, whatever. So once I got to, it was around 3 o'clock, and I had been on the walking epidural for about 2 hours. I was laying down, I had the peanut ball in between my legs, and everything was going good. And then all of a sudden she had a deceleration that lasted a few minutes. So the nurses rushed in, they had me switch from one side to the other side, they had me on all fours, and they managed to stabilize her, but my doctor did come in. He did an ultrasound to make sure that like the cord wasn't wrapped around her neck or anything like that. And this came after a really, really strong contraction. He made sure that the cord wasn't wrapped around her neck or anything like that. And he basically just told me that her fluid levels were really, really low, like her reserve was really low, and that I had to weigh out the option of possibly getting a C-section at this point, because it might just be what was safest for the baby. But he did give me the option of pumping me with more fluid, seeing how she reacted to that, and then going from there, which is what I did. So they pumped me with more fluid. This was around 3:30. And 30 minutes later, she was still having a little bit of decelerations with every contraction, but they weren't anything too significant, like not as bad as the last one. And the doctor came back in around 4. He checked me. He's like, you're still at 8 centimeters. But basically, every single time that you have a contraction, her head is in the birth canal. And every time she tries to go get deeper in the birth canal, that's when her heart rate drops. So at this point, I kind of just opted for the C-section. I really didn't want to put her in more distress. I didn't want to have to attempt a vaginal birth and then end up needing an emergency C-section anyways. She wasn't all the way down, so I just felt like it was the safest option for her, and that's basically what we did. They prepped everything, got me ready. We went to the OR. We had to end up calling all of our family because they were still driving up and letting them know that we were going to be having the baby within the next half hour because we were going to be having to get a C-section. And yeah, so we went, and she was born at 4:50 p.m., weighing 5 pounds, 12 ounces, perfectly healthy, which I'm super, super grateful for. There was absolutely nothing wrong with her. We did some skin to skin. We went to recovery, and she was able to stay with us the whole entire time, which I'm so, so grateful for. The incision itself, obviously healing was pretty intense the first few days. After the epidural wore off, the pain started, but you know, it was manageable and it wasn't anything too crazy. I was off pain medication after about a week, and other than that, everything was perfectly fine. I'm gonna do a separate video on postpartum, and especially things that I wish I knew about postpartum, because emotionally it was really rough for me, just because I feel like everything that I didn't want to happen ended up happening. I wanted to go with the least amount of medical involvement possible. I ended up having to get induced. I wanted to go with a natural birth. I ended up getting a epidural. I wanted to have a vaginal birth. I ended up having to get a C-section. I wanted to breastfeed. I ended up having to give her formula, which is, like I said, I'm going to make a video on postpartum and talk about that a little bit more. But overall, the experience itself was not traumatic at all, I don't think. I had an amazing team of nurses. My doctor was phenomenal. I absolutely love him. I trusted him, and I know that he had my best interest and my baby's best interest, and everything came out the way that it had to in order to get us both out of the situation safely and healthy, and that's all that I'm grateful for, honestly. But yeah, that's basically it for my labor and delivery story. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and be sure to stay tuned for the next video, which is going to be my video on postpartum and everything that I felt and things that I wish I would have known. And I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!